Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of Deloitte Talent Management Platform 2024. Today promises to be an insightful and engaging session. Once again, my name is Oluwatobi Oluyede. Yesterday, we explored the topic Thriving Beyond Boundaries. Today, we're going to discuss leveraging generative AI to optimize the human capital function. To start with, let's set a few housekeeping rules to guide today's session. First, we encourage you to be present, to unplug, disconnect, be in the moment. So many insightful information is going to be shared today. You do not want to miss out on any. If you have any questions for the speaker during the presentation, please use the Q&A feature located on the toolbar of your screen. If you'd like to make any comments during the presentation, please use the chat feature on your screen. To start with, I'm glad to introduce our moderators for today. Please meet Esther Sheyeogun and Chizoba Mujego.
Esther is a seasoned human capital manager with over 11 years of experience in designing and implementing effective employee strategies. Currently, as a manager at Deloitte West Africa, Esther leads the Total Rewards team. She has a proven track record in working with clients across diverse industries to develop employee value propositions and design comprehensive compensation and reward packages. Before joining Deloitte West Africa, she held roles at KPMG Nigeria and a leading pharmaceutical company. At KPMG, she specialized in compensation and benefits. In her role at the pharmaceutical company, she led company-wide reward and performance initiatives across 6 business regions. Please make welcome Esther Sheyeogun. Chizoba is a highly experienced organizational leader with a 32-year career spanning diverse sectors, including public service, oil and gas, manufacturing, marketing, consulting, and telecommunications. She holds an MBA from the University of Benin and is a certified global professional in HR, GPHR. Chizoba's impressive career journey began at Guinness Nigeria plc and has included significant roles at renowned organizations like Accenture, MTN Group, ECOWAS, and the Central Bank of Nigeria. Since 2019, she has served as Principal Public Sector Consultant at Deloitte Consulting, where she has spearheaded projects focused on public sector leadership development and HR transformation. Her international expertise includes leading projects under the GIZ EU and World Bank with a focus on organizational development and capacity building across West Africa. A dedicated professional, Chizoba is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria and a member of the Institute of Directors. She actively contributes to governance and advisory roles. Please make welcome Chizoba Mojeku.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope we're all excited as I am to be here. Like my colleague Toby had mentioned, today is the day 2 of our Deloitte Talent Management Platform. For those that joined yesterday, you would agree with me that yesterday's session was insightful and very interesting, and today is going to be the same. Today, we're talking about leveraging generative AI to optimize the human capital function. And this particular topic is dear to me because not only as a human HR professional, also I'm someone that I've taken a keen interest in watching futuristic and dystopian movies. So getting to see all this come to life is very interesting to me. We can all agree that generative AI is changing things, and we can agree that it is the future. One major event that also qualifies this is NVIDIA taking over Apple as the most valuable public company. And NVIDIA is the dominant supplier of GPUs that are used to develop and deploy advanced AI software like OpenAI's ChatGPT. So while we wait for others to join, we would like to see where everyone are joining from. So in the chat box, please drop where you're joining from and your current role. We'll also encourage everyone to invite your colleagues. This is a session you will not want to miss out on. So please drop in the chat box. Let's see where you're joining from. Okay. Okay, we have someone joining from Abuja, Lagos. Okay. Okay, it's quite a lot of Lagos. Okay, we have an accountant too joining us. Interesting. So this session is not just only for HR professionals. Oh, we have someone from Namibia. Fantastic, fantastic. Good to have everyone here. Okay. Okay, another person from Lagos. Good, good, good. Please invite your colleagues and your friends to join us. Today's session is going to be very, very interesting. We have a lineup of experts that are going to be talking during the panel conversations, and it's going to be interesting. Okay, so as not to take much time. Okay, so as not to take much of our time while we wait for others to join us, please let us welcome our host for today.
Joseph is a seasoned human capital professional and partner, Human Capital, Deloitte, West Africa. He boasts over 22 years of diverse experience across various industries, including financial services, consumer goods and services, public sector, and NGOs, amongst others. With a deep understanding of these sectors, he offers clients valuable insights on leveraging human capital to drive organizational value. Before joining Deloitte, Joseph spent over a decade dedicated to learning and development, facilitating over 1,000 courses for both public and private sector organizations. His extensive experience in the banking sector, having supported over 70% of the industry's banks, underscores his expertise in providing tailored learning solutions. Joseph's ability to create practical solutions to complex business challenges has been instrumental in numerous engagements for both public and private sector clients. His expertise spans strategy development and implementation, process improvement, service excellence, risk management advisory, and human capital solutions. Joseph is a member of the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM, and a certified organizational development specialist. Please make welcome Joseph Olofishola.
Good morning, everyone. Let me add my voice to Esther. It's interesting again for me to be here today, and I look forward to another interesting session. I'm still trying to wrap my head around, what happened yesterday in terms of the kind of feedback we're getting, and really for me, it's quite exciting and quite encouraging. So it is my privilege this morning to welcome all of you to this wonderful session. And I do look forward to, a fantastic session, like I said. Now, just as a way of welcoming all of us, this morning we're talking about how do we leverage on AI or generative AI to optimize the HR function. And I'll try and just start very quickly. I know I have a short time to do this, and I know I've been told that I need to do a comeback at some point. So yesterday we spoke a lot in terms of the boundaryless world of work, and more importantly, we talk about what is happening today. And in the course of our discussion yesterday, we did explain the fact that in the boundaryless world of work is changing, the workforce are changing, the workforce is changing, and of course, jobs are also changing. And to that extent, it is important that we need to also ask ourselves, what does it mean for us as HR? Okay, what are we seeing? Now, there are all manner of data out there, which I'm going to be sharing at some point, but clearly we're beginning to see, as this world of work is changing, we're seeing things around, of course, the new workforce ecosystem. We see things around augmentation, and I know there's going to be a lot of conversation we're going to have at some point in the course of this session. And there's a lot around human performance, which we spoke a lot about yesterday, and of course, the worker agency. So as we go through this whole process, what we're also saying is we're asking ourselves, what does it mean for AI? What does it mean for HR? What does it mean for our function of HR? Now, talking about generative AI. Now, as we all know, well, most of us will know, AI has been with us for a while, so it's not something that is new. But what has happened in the last couple of years is the fact that we've seen two things driving, a major shift. And the first being technology, which, I'm sure I'm going to leave the audience and I'm going to leave my colleague, Jania, who is going to be talking a lot around us. So there's technology in terms of that growth is exponential. There's also the bit in terms of data. We're seeing for those who can remember, 2 years ago, we did talk about the fact that, 3 years ago actually, that the rate at which organizations are gathering data or collecting data, was about 9 times what we used to see before. And that means that, we have that volume of data out there. And with these two, parameters or these two factors or these two, probably call it disruptors, we're seeing, that, advent of, or we're seeing that flow or that new wave of people talking about AI. So generative AI is today, it's a topical issue, but going to the issue around what is generative AI, I'm not going to go to that conversation because I'm sure we're going to talk about that at some point. But clearly, just be very simple. Prior to, like I said, that we've always had AI. Now, what we had prior to now was, of course, so you see, just go back to your recommender system. For those of us who buy on Amazon, you watch your Netflix, of course, that's what you see. So at each point in time, it recommends a movie to you or recommends a book for you to read. But today, we're seeing that generative AI, where we're talking about creating new content, not just showing you find it, but actually creating new content. And that's what, we see, today in terms of generative AI. Now, as we talk about this entire concept, the reality is, as HR, practitioners, we need to start asking ourselves, how do we leverage on this? And I like what, when one of the speakers said earlier, that when we talk about generative AI, we're not just looking at looking at HR. We're looking at HR, we're also looking at the entire organization. And if you recall yesterday, we did talk about the fact that in a boundaryless world, we also require HR to be boundaryless. Okay, and that's why we said that we're moving away from HR being a function to becoming a discipline. And to that extent, it means that we have a role to play in driving this. Can I go to the next slide? So we have a role in driving this. And like I did say earlier, so generative AI is taking the center stage. I'm going to just draw attention to a couple of, stats on the screen. So we're seeing increasing number of users. We're seeing the fact that it's changing the way our work is being done. And we're seeing, in fact, if you look at what Goldman Sachs said generative AI would impact or could impact 300 million jobs. That's massive by any standard. So I'm sure there's several tons and tons of data that we can talk about in terms of generative AI. And the fact remains that it has come to stay. Next slide. So as we go through this journey and trying to look at this, the question therefore is, what should we do as HR? Should we remain a spectator, or should we actually be the one leading that change? Again, I'm not to bore you with this, these different stats, because this is going to be shared with you. But the reality is the fact that as the world is changing, even though there's several, some believe that generative AI is still a hype, but the reality is that we're beginning to see that significant potential in using AI, and the extent, what that simply means rather is the fact that we need to ask ourselves as HR people, what do we need to do? Next slide. So again, looking at this data on the screen, I've spoken about the what Goldman Sachs said, but I think this is really staggering when you say 2/3 of occupation could be potentially impacted by AI. And that for me is a question for all of us in the room as HR experts, because we're going to be asking ourselves that question. What should we do? Because this in itself creates some level of fear in our people, because people are asking themselves that question. Oh, will HR take over my job? What happens thereafter? What's going to happen? I'm not going to talk about that at this point, because I'm sure we'll talk about it as we go along the line. Again, from the World Economic Forum, we see the same stats, also showing us the fact that 44% of workers, core skills are expected to change. So there's the issue of, work being threatened. There's an issue around the skills. Of course, calling for new skills at the end of the day as well. Now, if you also look beyond this, we also see things around, workforce, asking themselves questions. What do I need to do on the back of this? If about 90% of workers are beginning to ask themselves, what would this mean for me? Is this going to be impacting my job? The question is, what do we do as HR? Next slide. So keeping this very simple, right? The reality is this, whether we like it or not, generative AI has the potential to change the world the world in ways that we can even imagine. And we had a chat just before this, which I'll talk about at some point. So it is not about generative AI, it's about our ability to imagine. And that is a new skill that we need to learn, which I'm going to talk about at some point. Because the reality is, as technology is growing at an exponential rate and new things are happening, we're asking ourselves, what is the capability of people to actually cope with this changing technology, right? And that's where that's fear, whether it's going to take over my job or not. So the whole idea here is HR, it's meant to be a catalyst in terms of how we move things. So job, it's going to change. There's going to be a shift in terms of job, of course, to skills that we've talked about. We spoke about this last year. It came up again yesterday. Next slide. Now, so the question therefore is, when we look at generative AI, if all agree with me that this has come to stay, the question is, what is our readiness? How are we going to really, as HR, how to leverage on this to optimize our function? Now, we went we did a study. We went to out there to the market to ask questions, organizations, and ask, and this up to CEO levels. And one of the things we asked was, what do they expect, or when do they expect to make changes to their talent strategy? Okay, and what was the feedback we got? So 70% said now they will do it, 31% said in another 1 to 2 years, and 24% said, 31 said, sorry, 1 to 2 years, and the 24% said within the next 1 year. So clearly, so like we said yesterday, the issue is no longer about knowing. So we do know, we recognize that bit, but the question will be doing, and that takes to the next bit to say, and the question was, what level of effort is the organization making to address workforce issues? Now, see what people have to say. So 74% said, we're educating the broader workforce, to raise that, fluency or that awareness, right? In respect to JI. Now, 74%, another 74% said, recruiting and hiring talent to drive Gen AI initiatives. And the other 73% said what they're doing basically is, trying to reskill their workers. Okay, so clearly what it's saying is the fact that if we then ask ourselves, how ready are we? And I'm going to leave this to our some feel, it hallucinates, some feel, how well can you use this to improve what you do, right? And that also comes back to us as HR leading that whole conversation. So we see things around, human replacement, algorithmic bias, happening. We see lots of personal touch. That is real, right? But the reality is, some of these things are also a function of how much can we imagine? What's our level of imagination? What's our level of curiosity in driving this? Now, from a boundaryless HR point of view, what we're saying is the fact that we're saying, as we think about this imagination deficit, how can HR help? Okay, now we're saying HR needs to start thinking beyond, of course, our traditional way of doing things. HR is no longer a function, it's a discipline, like I did mention earlier. And it means that we need to be able to talk about how do we elevate, productivity. How do we change how things are done? How do we democratize even HR in itself? In other words, how do we also recognize that as our role as HR is working with the rest of the firm and helping them in this journey that, that we're going into, right? The other bit is, how do we also ensure that we drive, that whole process, in terms of, helping to make the right decisions, working with AI, and more importantly, recognize that really, that in that workforce ecosystem, that AI is one of the workforce that we need to start thinking about. And that simply means that we have to think about, how do we reskill, how do we upskill, how do we collaborate, how do we even redesign the way work is being done, and so many other things. Next slide. So I won't bore us with this, but clearly, if you look at the entire life cycle of, the entire talent life cycle, we will agree with you that every bit of that life cycle is going to be impacted by AI. Okay, so from job posting to candidate screening to candidate interviews to job offers, onboarding, performance management, L&D, and even the general people experience will all be impacted. I will share with you some of the use cases that we've seen, along the line. But clearly, the reality is that every aspect of this life cycle will be impacted one way or the other. Now, what will then change is going to be in terms of where are we on the journey, what is the magnitude of change that is going to happen, how we to deal with that change, which I will talk about at some point. Next slide. Now, again, we've put together here a few case studies, which I'm going to just, run through quite quickly. And we've seen this happen where, HR teams are beginning to deploy, generative AI in different ways. And some of the outcomes we're seeing, things around, operational efficiency and customer service. We're seeing things in terms of, access to on-demand insights, right? And I've seen examples, from organizations. We're seeing instances where it's also helping to increase the effectiveness of people manager, right? In terms of how they deal with things on a real-time basis, how to look at things around feedback and so on. We're also seeing how this has helped, and I'm sure that a lot of us, will agree with this, how, this has helped in terms of augmenting the talent management process, or talent acquisition process. In other words, how we identify candidates, how we create job descriptions, how we do things around grading and leveling, and so on, and even how we source for candidates. So we're seeing, AI helping in these various ways. Again, there's the other bit around how do we also ensure, or we've seen is also driving what you call that workforce experience, which is quite important. And today, I know, like I just said, I was talking about the reason why we need to start thinking of the role of that CHR role being, again, now chief people experience, being, chief integrator, being chief, what's it called, chief collaboration officer, right? So we're seeing a lot of things in that space. We're also seeing, things around goal setting, your performance management. And these are examples that, we already have, around, and people are beginning to test these things and see how, value and deriving value from this. Next slide. Now, a critical example is, because one of the things we also talk about at some point is we talk about these examples, right? We also, we have examples and use cases across different industries. I'm not going to run through this, but let's just keep it very simple. So one is with a big, global bank where they've had to create, right, in terms of how they simplified work to be done for their people. And because that's quite important. Because the other day is how do we create innovation? How do we simplify work, the way work should be done? And this has helped, in actually driving business success or outcomes. Next slide. So I'm going to skip all this, but just to let you know that these are things, you're going to get the slide or the deck, right? Now, these are just some examples we have from Unilever, we have T-Mobile, we have IBM, we have Deloitte. And then, of course, and this is across different areas. Now, the question is this: as we go through this journey, because I'm going to now, at this point, leave the floor for, our panelists to now. We need to ask ourselves, what exactly are we trying to achieve? Now, what we see as, generative AI will mature as it matures, and of course, it gets, proliferated, across organizations. The role of HR will be impacted. Okay, and this impact will be to different degrees. So the question is, what then does it mean for us? How do we envision that future? So for us, the way we say this is they're about, so it's, if you want to call it a continuum, right? It is, we start somewhere and then we'll end at some point. So the first is around automation. So we say automate, and clearly we see examples, in terms of how we do this. Process HR, based on certain data triggers, you can develop, inquiry based on, via a Q&A, chatbot. Then of course, from there, which is basically around, so the focus here is around efficiency and cost optimization. And next, of course, is augment. Now, there's always, I know we've had this question back and forth. right? Is AI going to take over my job or is it going to augment my job? Again, I'm going to leave that to the panelists to talk about at some point. But clearly, there's also the issue around how do we improve productivity and experience, right? And this is important. Now, the next bit, of course, around this is, how do we, create value and, of course, create insights. So that's the next bit, which is, of course, extend, right? So we automate, we augment, we then extend, move beyond just, this first two. And this is where we do a lot of analysis. I was talking to someone yesterday, and this actually was part of what we spoke about. How can we, and the question was, the scenario role we talked about, CHRO rather, was around data, sitting on a large pool of data, and yet we are not generating the right insight. And how can we do this and create value for the business? And of course, the last bit is around how do we also elevate that human experience at the end of the day. So how do we create, those new programs? How do we create, those new initiatives? How do we drive? Remember yesterday, we talked about those human outcomes, how we drive those human outcomes. And AI sits right at the center in doing this. Next slide. So in closing, right, as we go through this journey, we also must recognize that it's going to be on an incremental basis. It's not going to, and I will say this, that I don't expect that we're going to have a big bang approach, but really it would need to happen on an incremental basis, right? Because really there's still a lot around learning, the flex is still not there, people that still have their concerns and the issues we'll talk about at some point. So we're going to move from AI assisted to AI augmented and to AI powered. What do I mean by that? So first is around where the human being still own that entire process in a way, but again, we are getting solutions from AI. To where we talk about, that AI augmented way, of course, it's now we have that collaboration between, humans and AI. And I'm sure, Jania will have examples to share with us, go through the line, and there are a couple of examples on the screen. The other bit, of course, is the last bit is where we talk about the AI powered. So in this bit, we're talking about where, AI primarily, of course, own, it's primarily own the process with human beings, of course, now managing the output, right, of what comes out of that. Next slide. So as we go through this, like in any human endeavor or any new discovery or initiative or idea, there will always be certain challenges. Now, so the question is, as good as AI is, of course, there are different stories around it, but the reality is that there are risks. And what's important is for us to manage those risks, right? Because in terms of the potential, the value that it brings to the table is quite huge. They cannot ignore those values because of the risk that we're going to be facing. So the question therefore is how do we manage those risks? So the risk around bias in terms of course, like someone said earlier, it's based on the data that's been generated by some people at some point. So if I had some bias against certain things, the reality is that it's probably going to also impact what I also generated or what then get into AI that get into that data space that AI can actually work on. Now the other bit is around cost. Okay, it's also again people are asking that question. Do you want to get certain tools? I'm sure Jenna will speak about a couple of those tools. How do we get those tools? How expensive will they be? How do we deal with this? How do we convince people, right, about this? Now, the other bit is in terms of the ethical use, right? Okay, so from an ethical perspective, again, the question is this ethical? Can we trust this? Can we not trust this? And one of the things we said is in trying to address this bit, right, is the fact that earlier I did talk about use cases. As we talk about those use cases, the reality is that you also need to be very careful in terms of how you use them. So it means that requires some level of, investigation to be sure that it makes sense because it's they are from certain sources, right? And to that extent, it's important that we also want to check to be sure that, yes, we can actually use this. And that's why one of the things that we see, organizations doing today is coming with what would that be ethical guideline as they run through this entire process. Yes, and people are talking about, the fact that Gen AI will hallucinate. And that means it's possible, right? The output at some point, of course, will be inaccurate or could be inaccurate. And it's a function of where is it coming from. right? But the reality again is, and that's why, like we said earlier today, if you do not, you can't, it's not just, the prompt that you get, right, to prompt and then you get an answer. The rest is that you also need that some level of subject matter expertise that also come to play so they can challenge what comes out of them so they can become more reliable. And the last bit, of course, is privacy. How do we deal with privacy, right? As we think about this, yes, data has been, fed into, to a store or somewhere, to a model that you are referencing, So again, and that's where, of course, as we talk about, we as HR, how we optimize our function, that's where we also have the role to play. What is the learning for our people? How do we guide them? Where can they go? Where should they not go? Remember yesterday we said something that's very categorical, and we're not going to run away from AI, is the fact that we must be able to give our people what we call that digital playground where they can experiment, a safe learning, environment for them to be able to drive, the right, for them to learn. And of course, they will make their mistakes along the line. And that's where we have that role as HR to actually also work across the different business area or businesses that we have across functions in order to drive this. Next slide. So in closing, right, and I'm going to come back to talk about this at some point. It's as we go through this journey, the question is, if AI has come to stay, what should we do as HR people? So at this point, I'll yield the floor to our very experienced, panelists to do justice to this, and I'll come back at some point. Once again, welcome all of you, to everyone, and I look forward to very, very interesting session once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you for setting the tone for the day. And thank you for those interesting insights on how Gen AI is changing the way we work. It is certain that Gen AI is going to be the future, is going to be part of the future of work. Now, before we go into the panel discussion, and also before I hand over to my co-moderator, delightful Chizoba, we're going to take a short poll. So we want to know, please, can we have the poll up now? We want to get to know how Gen AI is challenging or enhancing the existing HR practices within your organization. You see a notification on your screen, and then you see a text box. Please, let's get your feedback, as this will also help drive the conversations we'll be having today. So please confirm you can see the poll now. Okay. If you can see the poll, please drop in the chat box yes, so that we are sure that you can see it. So let's find out how. I think the first question is, how does the Gen AI align with the current HR practices in your organization? And okay, someone said that there is a dark box blocking some part of the screen. Okay, please, can we see if we can resolve that? Obstructing our view, please. Okay, fantastic. Okay, we'll give it some time and then we'll look at the results. Thank you, everyone. Please, let's get your views on how Gen AI is impacting your current HR practices. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So while people are responding, I would hand over to my co-moderator, and then we'll get to read out the responses. And I believe that our panelists will answer some of the questions, or if we get insights from there, we'll get to address that. All right, thank you very much. Over to you, Chizoba.
Thank you so much, Esther. Good morning, everyone. And it's a very bright and sunny day today in, I'm joining from Abuja, and I know we're all joining from all parts of the world. So let's meet our panelists today, because today is about our panelists and not about the rest of us in Deloitte, so we can hear what's going on in the world of AI in human resources. So please, let's meet our panelists this morning. Thank you very much.
Jania is a partner and the Africa Artificial Intelligence and Data Leader at Deloitte. She assists organizations with their AI transformation journey to enable data-driven decision-making throughout the organization, helping clients set up data and AI strategies and target operating models, and building core data analytics and AI capabilities. She moved to Nigeria 5 years ago from Deloitte UK, where she was an assistant director in the forensics technology business in the financial advisory division. She led the AI unit and specialized in developing AI and analytics solutions in the domains of fraud, bribery and corruption, and anti-money laundering. Jania leads the Generative AI practice for Africa, where she promotes AI fluency within clients and industries, grows AI talent on the continent, and takes enterprise-scale generative AI solutions to clients in the form of AI labs, accelerated use case development, and large language model managed services within Deloitte's trustworthy AI framework. Jania has worked as a big data consultant in the US, UK, and Asia Pacific, where she provided data management solutions to major international financial institutions such as JP Morgan Chase, Citi, UBS, HSBC, and telecommunication companies such as BT and Vodafone. She holds a PhD in computer vision from University College London, UCL, with 6 scientific publications to date. Please make welcome Jania Okwechime. Esohe Adetola is a seasoned HR professional with extensive experience in generalist HR, specializing in talent management, recruitment and selection, performance management, and employee relations. She has a strong track record of delivering value-adding HR solutions in both the oil and gas and banking sectors. With a deep understanding of employment law and HR best practices, she has successfully implemented HR strategies to optimize organizational performance and employee satisfaction for Shell. She's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. In the past, she has volunteered as a member of the CIPM Annual Conference Planning Committee and has led as the chairman of the same committee. Please make welcome Esohe Adetola. Kumbi Adeoti is a seasoned HR leader with over 24 years of experience driving strategic HR initiatives and organizational transformation across various industries in sub-Saharan Africa. Previously, she held key leadership roles at renowned organizations such as Standard Chartered Bank, Airtel, and Zain. As the Chief People Experience Officer at Leadway Group, Kumbi oversees HR and customer experience functions for multiple entities. She has a proven track record of delivering significant results, including leading large-scale restructuring, building high-performing teams, and improving employee engagement. Kumbi is recognized for her contributions to the HR field, including winning the award for Peak Performing Woman of the Year in 2023. She is an active member of various professional organizations, including SHRM Lagos. She volunteers her time at the local chapter of SHRM Lagos. She is a licensed HR practitioner both at local and global levels, serving in various executive capacities in these professional bodies and committees. She is also a member of HR Forbes Council, as well as the European Mentorship and Coaching Council. She is an independent executive director on several company boards, a management board member of Pistis Life and Leadership Institute, and a non-executive director of the board of Leadway Health. Please make welcome Kumbi Adeoti. Temi Dali is a seasoned professional with over 20 years of exceptional performance in the HR field. She has built core expertise in strategic leadership, business management, people management, talent management, career development, transformational change, and project management. As the Pioneer Group Executive Human Capital, Infrastructure and Corporate Services of Sterling Financial Holdings Co., she successfully steered the human capital function through the bank's transition into a holding company. Her visionary leadership has resulted in operational excellence, sustainable growth, and a high-performance culture. She currently leads a team of human capital and corporate services experts dedicated to creating an enabling work environment and remarkably skilled workforce in a highly demanding digital world of work. Her efforts in this regard are noteworthy as they have earned the organization the prestigious legendary award by the Great Place to Work Institute for being recognized as a Great Place to Work 5 years in a row. Temi Dali is an alumna of Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria, Middlesex Business School, London, and the Wharton School, USA. She holds memberships in esteemed professional bodies, including the Chartered Institute of Directors, Nigeria, the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, CIPD, UK, the Society of Human Resource Management, USA, and the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, Nigeria, amongst others. Her multifaceted career and dedication to excellence in HR leadership makes her a prominent figure in the industry and an invaluable asset to the organizations she serves. Please make welcome Temi Dali. Dr. Steve Oj boasts an impressive career spanning over 25 years in human resources management. He possesses a diverse background, having worked in consulting, manufacturing, and the oil and gas industry, both in Nigeria and internationally. Currently, Dr. Oj serves as the Director, Corporate Services at Seplat Energy PLC. Previously, he held the position of Employee and Industrial Relations and Employee Communications Manager for Shell companies in Nigeria. Dr. Oj is a highly qualified professional with a bachelor's and master's degree in economics, another master's degree and a doctorate in social sciences, and an MBA. He is a Chartered Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, a member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, a Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Mediators and Conciliators, and a Chartered member of ADR Canada. Dr. Oj actively contributes to the HR community. He previously served as chairman of the Rivers State branch of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management of Nigeria and is currently a member of the Institute's Strategic Planning and Implementation Committee. Additionally, he is a council member of the Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. Please make welcome Dr. Steve Oj.
Thank you very much. We have met all our panelists this morning, and it promises to be an exciting conversation with the lineup of our panelists. I can see all the emojis, the claps and the applause coming in that, we do have a group of people, a group of panelists who will discuss this in great detail. We will take from the questioning, we'll start with Temi because Temi will have to drop off at some point. She's got an appointment that she needs to keep. So we'll start with Temi. And Temi, our first question to you will be, what do you think, about these, about AI and the use of AI in human resources, so that at least we can warm up our panelists getting ready into the questions that we're going to hear from our audience. Temi.
Thank you. Thank you, Chizoba. Good morning to everyone. I believe that you can hear me, that I'm clear. Very, very interesting conversations and very relevant for the times that we're in. I mean, when you look across organizations, a lot of organizations have started to adopt AI, Gen AI, in a lot of the things that they do. Research shows that at least one or two business functions, and I mean, Joseph shared a couple of data speaking to that. However, when you come to the HR functions, it dropped significantly to just 3% across organizations, which means that HR is lagging behind. And like he said, HR is supposed to be the forefront of any changes that is happening in the organization. There's a research by Microsoft that shows that 70% of employees are already comfortable with using AI tools. And so if 3% in terms of the people who are supposed to manage the people are just at 3%, and 70% of our employees are already exploring and using and playing with a lot of these AI tools, then there's a lot of catching up on our side to be done. The truth is that the more we're comfortable and the more we utilize AI, the more times we have for interactions, people connections, and this is going to have an effect on efficiency and cost optimization across the organization. When we bring it on to HR, but I want to talk a bit about Gen AI. What is Gen AI? Gen AI is simply a subset of AI that uses patterns and kind of mimics patterns and learnings over time, depending on the data we put in, and mimics the human creativity. So there's a lot that we can do with it. If we look across the HR landscape, from content, in terms of the employee life cycle, right from talent acquisition to even offboarding, learning, engagement, onboarding employees. I mean, there's a lot that we can utilize it for. We've started to use a number of these AIs and we can see the effect in terms of efficiency and how we're able to reach the far reach of employees. Communication is key. Data analysis, which is also critical. Gen AI can create patterns from large data sets. And that is what we need, from your performance management to simple things as your attrition rate, to even your learning content, how you begin to build those things. So definitely, there's a lot. Even coding, in terms of our programs, our curriculums, there's just so much that we can utilize this tool for. So for me, it's relevant. I'm interested in learning what a lot of people are using Gen AI for and how we can really leverage this, and also ensure that as an HR professional, we get right into it and begin to leverage on this powerful tool. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Temi, for setting a great foundation for the conversation that we're going to have. If you're still on the call much later, we will come back to you. If not, do have a great day, and we'll continue the conversation either on LinkedIn or physically, because we had such a great conversation this morning about the use cases of AI in organizations. So if I can quickly ask Esohe, how can HR pinpoint the most impactful areas within the function for Gen AI implementation in ways that we can maximize its benefits?
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. It's really my pleasure to be here. I must say it's my first time attending any of Deloitte's such conversations, and I think for me it's an eye-opener, and Joe, I promise you to do a bit more on this one. So if I listen to your question is around how HR can pinpoint the most impactful areas, right, Chizoba?
Yes, that would be it.
Yeah, so one of the things that Joseph did for us when he was speaking at the beginning was to kind of show us the whole, would I say, end-to-end process of a typical employee, right, an organization, which then just typifies the whole end-to-end process of what HR aims to deliver to people. And I think the first place to start for any HR practitioner or any HR function is to actually look through each of those, right? So where exactly, what are your processes and where are you in each of them? So it's important for HR to assess, right, each of the processes And one of the things you could do, or you would find yourself finding out if you do that, it's understanding where the pain points are for people. Joe mentioned about the whole thing about employee experience. If you do that well, you might even be able to begin to get some insight, right, into what those pain points would are like and what people are looking for, And in this day of work where people have surveys and platforms where they can actually air their opinion, or would I say also vent, depending on how it is, you will get to hear a lot, right? Another thing that you could then also begin to look at is understand which of them are the, would I say, low-hanging fruits or would have the biggest impact for you? What would take what kind of time, what requires immediate attention and what amount of attention you need to give to it and all of that. I think another place that you may also begin to then wonder is what kind of impact are you looking at, right? So if I take a recruitment process, for example, and I say, because they say my talents would help me deliver my priorities and the performance to determine how I got an organization, then it is important that at every point in time, I have real talents, who are aligned with the company's vision or culture, to deliver all of that. Now, if I look at that talent acquisition process, it is therefore important that I inject some level of generative AI into it. As difficult or as would I say, we have identified some risk in that space, it means that I'm going to also be working the mitigations into those risks. But if I take the talent acquisition process, for example, it starts from even, first of all, understanding, can I use AI to look at my job descriptions, right? To generate a JD that actually speaks to the skills, the competencies, the content that I'm looking for in a particular person, right? Depending on the algorithm behind it, I could set those rules that will help me be able to create that JD that is bespoke to my organization. And I start from there. I could then also look at what does screening look like for me? Today, in today's world where I have, for one application I post, I get over 5,000. For one job that I post, rather, I get over 5,000 applications, right? AI would come to my rescue any day if I set the right parameters behind it, right? I'm able to determine what kind of people I'm looking for, shape, size, everything you can think of, right? You will get them. But when I sit back as an HR practitioner and I think about that, for example, I do have some concerns, and I think we will come to that later. But even extend that a bit, right, to even your selection process or the interviews. That I have an issue with, and you could talk about, okay, inject some human elements to this. But in today's world, we see people go through interviews where they have no physical interaction with the interviewer, and it's all based on AI. And at the end of the day, that selection process is actually a success. You get talents, that would work for you and help you meet your objectives as a company. But I'm hoping that we'll have time to look at, what those risks are. And for me as an HR person, that's where I have been thinking, in the past few days, looking forward to coming to this session around, okay, so those risks that come with a process like what I have just discussed, how do we mitigate them? How do we bring in some elements of human feeling, that people want, into all of that kind of process? Anyway, those are my immediate thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You've raised some very pertinent questions, and you can see the thumbs up, from the participant. This resonates very well with them. You've talked about some of the use cases. You've said, let's start from somewhere. Let's look at the process, and then we can then now start from somewhere. But you've raised something interesting, about the use of ATS, both in the screening as well as use of generative AI in interviews. And you're asking, what are the risks? And, how do we mitigate those risks? Those questions, there are quite a lot of questions that we're going to push to Jania. And so we're going to hold the easier conversations and then get Jania to let's talk about adoption, and let's talk about the bony part of AI. And so, Kumbi, one of the questions that we've been asked is, what are, I'm just leading from what Esohe has said, the use of AI in recruitment and in development of the job descriptions. What are your thoughts around that? So what are the advantages and potential drawbacks of using generative AI to create job descriptions and to evaluate a candidate's suitability? So Kumbi.
Thank you, Chizoba. As you were saying it, I was smiling because apparently a number of us some days ago, and let me use this example. Some days ago, we all saw on social media the assault that happened between a delivery guy who was meant to drop off something for a House rep member. And then subsequently, there was the apology letter by the House of Rep member. And guess what? That generated debate. And what was the debate? This is AI written. This is AI written. What nonsense is this? And everybody could begin to pick out the sentiments, is this the right thing to put out there? Is this but we all knew straight away that this wasn't written from a position of connectedness and a position of genuity, and it wasn't authentic in any way. And that begins to show you some of the disadvantages and the concerns that Esohe has raised. When she said with interview, oops, I'm iffy, I said, wow, there are quite a number of us that are still at that point. And that raises the issue of bias that Joseph actually mentioned earlier. So I'll probably start with the drawbacks. Because this is collective data that has been used, that is being taken from different parts of the world. And like Joseph mentioned, it is going to be based on the perceptives of the people who have put in the data. So there will be the nuances that would always be there. And because the good thing is as we continue to train, because it's generative, we then use, because we're talking about questions earlier, we're talking about prompts. How do you begin to refine to get to the value of what you want? But you can't just take it hook, line, and sinker. That is one disadvantage. And guess what? The other one that I would really talk about is we will get to a point where, I am a victim. You ask me something, I want to check something, I have a knowledge, but guess what? I first go to ChatGPT. I'm asking, give me thoughts around this. If I think I'm not getting as much as I want, I go to my phone, Meta AI, and I'm rethinking the prompt. Guess what? You start to have over-reliance unconsciously. And remember that you gave an example of someone who saw you in church and say, oh, that memo you taught me, and now I've trained my chat bot to become like this. Guess what? So even though we are reskilling, but are we skilling to become very dependent in a different way? That's another thing. And the day the technology doesn't exist, what happens to us? We recall some months back that where we had a global failure around systems, and a lot of it was actually highly dependent on even artificial intelligence that has been embedded into automotive systems. And guess what? The whole world was nearly down. Systems, organizations, and all of that. Those are things that we really need to think about, because technology would always be the technology. And then there will always be the data privacy concern. But having said all of that, the truth is this. There's that thing about efficiency. Imagine you need to do we talked about the recruitment, we talked about interviews, but guess what? You have a competency framework, and all you have to do is put that competency framework to say, I need this kind of person, I need this behavior, I need this skill set, things that have been deployed, you know, and it makes it just easier, even for you to get people, not just within your local space, it gives you that global expanse as well. So not only will you save on time, you are likely to get what is more qualitative if you understand how to use it and get the best out of the process. The other part of it is also that, look, we can begin to have some form of consistency around the very differently and improve on what we do. It also helps overall when you look at it. If we continue on this path, we're eventually going to be reskilling, and we're getting to what is even more strategic and taking away what is even more what is more mundane, as it were. So from all of these perspectives, I think, you know, whilst we would have and I'm waiting for Jania as well, while we have the concerns around the risk, around what is really ethical, to what extent should we be going? And we have concerns of, oh, we're going to put our entire data somewhere. Who do we know? We are all afraid about cybersecurity. We've seen what has happened for those of us who are not in Nigeria. In recent times, there has, and in fact, it's not even restricted to Nigeria, to be honest. There's a lot of cyber crimes going on. And, you know, you are storing data somewhere, you're wondering accessibility, what kind of security networks is protecting this, and at the same time, you require it to continually improve what you do. And in terms of scalability, because as it is today, Joseph had mentioned that we really need to be thinking, because we're supposed to be at the driver's seat. How do we enable our organization to take the position, to then put us in the position of the market where our products, our services are not, while we're here locally, we're globally relevant and we're giving value. And to be able to do that, you honestly need all of this. What then happens to your data when it is out in the space, you know? So, but yes, the advantages are really there, and we become a better version of ourselves, because even intellectual capacity is going to change altogether with this. But the question is, what do we do with those disadvantages? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I like how you brought in all the, you started with the risk. You know, it could be sterile. Some of the, if we used it, you know, in a generic way, it could, you know, be sterile. There could be over reliance, and are we really skilling to become dependent? But you also brought in the conversations around the efficiency, the consistency, and for us to innovate differently. And we need to automate the routine. And that brings us to, you know, one of the trends for HC, one of the HC trends for 2024 is the imagination deficit. And, you know, when we're having this conversation, as we move into this conversation, we need to look at what we need. We know that we need AI and we can use it, but then the question is, what's stopping us from adopting AI? You've also said, you know, you could train it and to do exactly what you want it to do. Steve, if we can drag you into this conversation, could you just share, you know, your thoughts around what are the steps? What steps do you think are essential for HR to establish a solid groundwork for generative AI solution? But before we get into that, please, we have hashtags that will continue these conversations outside here. We've got hashtag DTMP 2024. Just check in the chat room. You'll see all the hashtags. Get on LinkedIn. Let's continue this conversation after this conversation. And of course, there is the party after party. When we stop at 11 o'clock, because we will have a hard stop at 11 o'clock, we will continue this conversation. So Steve, what are the steps essential for HR to establish a solid groundwork for AI implementation?
Okay, so thank you. Thanks, everyone. And happy to be here again. It is about, I don't know how you and Joseph are doing it, as I'm always surrounded by the
By
love of so
women.
many women. So thank you very much. So blessed am I. Yesterday I was blessed, today I'm still blessed. So thank you. Um, so I try to just go back to the basics again. For those of us who remember this beautiful book written by Dave Ulrich that set all of us on the path to where we started adopting the HR business partnering model. I think the book is Human Resource Champions, I think written 1996. And there, it was able to break down the role of HR into four buckets, four quadrants. And it was actually quite a good visionary in a sense, because in there, it talked about administrative things, building the firm architecture. And it talked about the person, if you do it so well, you are referred to as admin experts. And it talked about the fact that up to 60% of what we do as HR people, largely transactionary, are the ones that can actually be automated. So imagine from 1996, it talked about the fact that those can be automated, and look at where we are today with AI helping us. And we talk about the C, which is management of change, and all the things that we do in that area. And as we talk about whether change agents, innovators, and so on and so forth, you see place for AI there as well. And you talk about managing employee contribution, the E part of it. So all the things we do in training, I work in the energy sector, in engineering sector really, where a lot depends on training for the people who help us to carry out all those very extensive engineering dependent work. And training is is a strong part of it. I'm already thinking about, hey, you really need to have a training school. So can you not just focus on virtual school? And I'm already testing that with Joseph, for example. And you talk about the strategic partnership part. And so what I'm learning, and incidentally, where I work, IT is part of my organization, my corporate services. And every time that I interact with my IT colleagues, so we are thinking about the fact that there is no stop, there is no limit in terms of what AI can do in these four quadrants. There's a lot in my administrative part, there's a lot in managing employee contribution, there's a lot in management of change. And even as you think about the remaining parts where you say strategic partnership to sit on the table, you need to be grounded in these areas to know how to focus the thoughts on the table and all the analytics you need to do to let data speak for you as you get to that table. So in every aspect of HR, you actually see the strong hand of AI in there. So if I therefore come back to the question in terms of the steps, so an understanding of these basics or the areas where, the functional areas of HR, you can now begin to say, hey, what are the steps? The part of it is just understanding the capabilities of AI. And as you understand the capabilities of AI, you can already begin to just educate leaders themselves in terms of what is possible, to highlight the positives while actually also paying attention to the risks that I imagine. And because it's moving so fast, legislation that will normally help us to address risks are not moving as fast as how the AI itself is moving. So we see gap before the legislation or regulation actually catch up. And we are left with how you can protect, minimize, I think I saw you made that point around mitigating those risks within your control in your organization. So this one of the steps is educating leadership in that respect. And to be able to also just say that, are there starter cases? Are there, because you cannot live long enough to make all the mistakes yourself. Are there people that are already winning in that game? And what are you learning from them? And what can you adapt? And what can you bring to your organization? And so that is what we do. So wherever we see things that are evolving. So what we do is to just have some soft teams, to almost like a lab and a culture of it. One example of it is what we call policy boards. Policy boards was when we have our policies all over the place, And we wanted to be able to use AI to be able to just, you are looking for what's my compassionate leave policy. Just say it and you just see it. You just type it and it comes out from somewhere. So we didn't want to start on the people side. We started from a less risky area, for example, in engineering, to just test how much it can help us to respond to questions on engineering. Once we got it right, HR adopted it. So today, all our policies are just bots. So when you need anything, just ask and you have that. Finance have now actually also, come along. And so we are using that stage by stage. Just make sure that as we learn, as we adopt, we learn from it, correct our mistakes and move on. And so that is how we're actually also growing. And because you see concerns from employees around the fact that has AI come to take my job? So there is one around the education of them to say, no, it's actually enriching your job. And there's a place for you and there's a place for AI. So you really need to be intentional about it. Otherwise, nobody will do it. So one of those steps is actually be intentional about it, to be able to say, this is what we want to do. This is how we're going to do it. These are the advantages and opportunities that come with it. It's going to help you to be a lot more agile, and it's good for the business ultimately. So that intentionality is equally very key for organizations, as you want to be able to adapt it and make it part of you going forward. So those are my immediate thoughts, Chizoba. I thought at some point when we'll get to the Q&A, I can share a bit more insights. Thank you. You are mute, sis. Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you so much. You dropped a lot of nuggets. Understand the capabilities, educate leaders, the legislation of risk is slow, so come up with mitigation, find use cases and learnings from them, and then you started with policy bots, and that's the playground. One of the human capital trends that we are talking about this week, for the past 2 days, is about the digital playground. So try out something, and then you tried it out in engineering, moved it to human resources, finance is adopting, and we've got to be intentional about it. So, Jania, we've set you up very, very nicely for the next conversation. And that's setup is, we've heard all the things that are being said. In the comments, somebody says a lot of people are mentally lazy and see AI as a way out. Jania, please position AI for us in terms of how a country low in adoption of artificial intelligence like Nigeria, and of course, we've been very low digital in human resources in Nigeria. You've got the leading ones. You've got quite a lot of organizations having not digitalized their human resources. So what do we do? How do we get up to speed? And what do we do in organizations? And how do we get people out of this, that AI makes people lazy?
Thank you very much. And I have to say, I've really enjoyed listening to my fellow panelists. I've taken some notes and some really interesting ones. I think Kumbi mentioned the over-reliance on AI and, what it means to us, what's going to happen to us if you're completely reliant. That actually reminds me of one of these memes. I'm sure, you get posts on social media that said, I wonder what has happened to that part of my brain that used to remember phone numbers. And that is so true for me. I mean, I used to know all the phone numbers by heart, and now I barely remember mine and maybe my husband's, like 2 initial ones. And I really wonder what's happened to that part of my brain, because I know we got phone books and, on our phone, and I don't need to remember. And that is very true. But then on the other hand, you look at Google Maps, we have stopped using maps, but we are using Google Maps. And I think, to me, that's a good example of what I believe in. And also at Deloitte, we came up with this term called the age of width, which means humans working with AI to get something done and do it more efficiently. So, when I'm always asked if AI is going to take over our jobs and, is going to replace humans, I always say, no, it's going to replace humans with AI. So it's like drivers are not going to stop using maps. AI is not replacing drivers. AI is replacing drivers who are using Google Maps, for example. So, I mean, I think that's just to set the tone. But there are so many interesting things that were covered. I think I'm going to touch up on some of them, and then I'm going to talk to you about our Deloitte's trustworthy AI and how we use that as a framework so that organizations can innovate with trust. And that's really critical. Innovation with trust. And that comes in all parts of the organization, including HR. So the going back to also the recruitment example, I think Esso mentioned that, she's not very, sure. She knows that there's going to be a lot that can be achieved, but, there's still that discomfort. And that's also very true. There was this example, I think Amazon years ago started using AI to recruit for data engineers. And this was a big case. They went public about it, and, it was used as a case study. So they'd use AI in their recruitment process to shortlist candidates for their data engineering roles. And then after a while, they noticed that there are no female candidates being shortlisted for this role. And then, it just like there was a light bulb moment for someone, and they went back and checked. And on the surface, AI was doing everything right. They had given it data, historic data, and was going through, picking the most successful candidates in the past and then shortlisting. But, it turned out 10 years ago, we didn't have female data engineers. It was a very male dominant industry. So what the algorithm was doing was automatically rejecting anything that had to do indication of female, like women's president of women's club, volleyball varsity, I don't know, captain of women's volleyball. And it would automatically reject because in the past, there were no female candidates. And once they found out, then obviously they changed the algorithm. And that then also talks about the importance of data, like Joseph mentioned. It's very important on what you use as your initial data to come up with decisions when it comes to AI and Gen AI. Then there were some of the concerns that were mentioned as well. So now when it comes to generative AI, it's actually reading through and coming up with shortlisting candidates or coming up with summary of paragraphs, or in this case, also pointing you to the direction of this policy and that policy. So how do you make sure that it's not hallucinating? And there's a term called grounding when it comes to generative AI. And it basically says, show me the source of the data, so that we don't just completely rely on the outcome, but rather we actually have it to pinpoint the source of that data. In this case could be, for example, even going back to the example of what is the certain policy in the organization, say maternity policy or compassionate leave policy. If it brings you the data, the policy document, and it turns out, oh, it's fetched the document from 1999, then you're going to think, probably that's outdated. So at least it's giving you that information to verify. And that's where what we call the human in the loop is important, the human element that gets augmented into this process. So it's a new process. It really is revolutionizing. I think in one of the in the slides that was shared earlier, it says the adoption of ChatGPT was huge. I think what took iPhone maybe 2 years to reach like 1 million users, it took ChatGPT 6 months or something like that. So it really is revolutionizing, which means a lot of thinking is going through how do we work out this ecosystem. On the other hand, it's very easy for organizations to be compliant and adopt policies when there are regulatory requirements and there's regulations set. But with AI, still the whole world is grappling with it. And the world's very first comprehensive regulation on AI, which is the AI EU Act, only came into effect in April, which sets requirements as to what are permissible uses of AI, what is not, what is high risk, and what is low risk, and what are some of the controls that you need to put in place. But while that's still going to be adopted and it's going to take time, organizations, as also mentioned by Steve, cannot wait and cannot afford to wait to be relying on some regulation that comes in place, which is why it's important to come up with a framework to put guardrails around the use of AI. And this applies to HR as well. So at Deloitte, we've come up with our trustworthy AI framework that is based on 6 pillars. It says that it needs to be private, whatever that you are building needs to take into account privacy considerations. And this is then where also things get a bit easier, because you don't have to all of a sudden think about new privacy requirements for AI. AI uses data, and there are clear privacy rules and regulations, including the Global Data Protection Act regulation, which is GDPR, and also the local version, the Nigeria Data Protection Act, NDPR, and the POPI Act, the Protection of Personal Information. So you already need to put that in place, regardless of what platform you're using GenAI on. Then there's transparency and explainability. And this is where you start to build trust within your organization, as well as with your customers and your clients outside your firm, and also for your image. So like this person got in trouble for using GenAI for that letter, if they had been transparent about part of this letter was automatically generated based on prompt, etc. Again, I'm not sure it was very appropriate for this one, but for you to be transparent that as you're communicating, for example, a lot of organizations have this chatbot where they help you with a lot of their services. Likewise, the HR unit can be having a chatbot that interacts with the rest of the staff. Just to have that transparency and the disclaimer that you are currently talking to an automated agent. Simple things like that, you are transparent. And also putting that in place that should you not be happy with this, or you want further information, just we will have a live operator to attend to you. Those are some of the things that are built in even automatically with some of the GenAI agents. When they start to they do sentiment analysis, and when they start to see that the person they're interacting with is getting agitated, then they switch to a live operator. And these are some of the things that HR can put in place. So transparency and explainability. There are already algorithms that are called supervisory technology, so subtech, that are supervising other AI algorithms. And that is to make sure that the algorithm is fair and impartial. So that's the next pillar. So that you can start to identify biases. Imagine, again, going back to that recruitment. Actually, this was another case study where I'm sure you're all familiar with this. When you do online exams, or you're, doing certifications, there's a camera that detects your movement, where you're looking, just to make sure you're not cheating. So there was this lady, African-American lady, whose entire PhD thesis was that these cameras do not detect other colored individuals. And that actually ends up getting them in trouble, because they think that they weren't present, or they were not looking at the right place. And there is all of that. So how do you then make sure that you build your algorithms that are fair and impartial? What are some of the processes? So algorithms like supervisory technology look at some of these features and say, did you train on the right demographic that you're going to apply this on? So that you're not unintentionally creating bias within your algorithm. And then responsible AI. So one of the things, I always use this example, every organization has a chief compliance officer, right? So if the organization does something that is against the regulation, the CCO will get in trouble. There will be reputational damage, there might be financial penalties, or the CCO could end up in jail if it's really like a terrible non-compliance. But imagine an algorithm. You think a robot worries about sitting in jail? No. So who do you put responsible of some of these use cases? So again, in HR organizations, there are, just like the head of HR is responsible for the recruitment process. Once we're adopting AI, then organizations are creating new roles, including chief AI officer or chief ethics officer. These are roles that are being created. Again, this has to do with how our jobs are changing. So going back over GenAI is taking over our jobs. No, it's not. GenAI or AI is transforming our jobs and creating jobs. Again, there is research that shows everyone was worried everything's going to be automated, people are going to be out of jobs. And it turns out, no, nobody actually wants 100% automation. Most of the time, a third of the jobs are automated, and that actually just frees up room for others to go and do, for that to have more human to human, more personal and conversations, and something that really has to do with our human skill. So the same way, when it comes to accountability and responsibility, so HR works with the chief AI officer and the ethics officer together, they create this ecosystem. that whatever solution that they build is responsible, and there's a person who is accountable. And then goes to safe and securing and safeguarding. So as part of the AI EU Act, there is as part of the non-permissible acts or non-permissible applications of AI is the automated surveillance and action taking without proper process and due course. So imagine if somebody has committed a crime, they go to court, they go to trial, they get fairly tried, and then there's a sentence at the end of the day. Now imagine, because you have surveillance, say, if actually even today, if you walk across central London, you'll appear at least in 20 different cameras. Now imagine you add face recognition on top of that, and then say, I've done something wrong, and somebody said, oh yeah, it was Janya who stole my bag. And they can find me, they can come and arrest me, they can put me in jail, nobody will even know. And that's not permissible. Now you bring that into an HR context. Imagine you're doing performance monitoring and performance management, and now you've started looking at the trends of this particular employee, how they are not attending meetings, they're falling behind, and you have a process that says if someone is underperforming, you give them a notice or you put them into a disciplinary performance development, a process that the company has, and then at the end of that, something, an outcome happens. Now imagine if you did all of that without actually having that human involved to have that conversation as to why haven't you been attending these meetings? It's like you've already, what do you call it? You've judged, you've convicted, and now you have processed that person. But if you actually, and you don't want that, but if you actually put a human in the loop, you might find out that this person had, I don't know, just lost a loved one, or they're going through severe depression, or they actually have been sick and they cannot attend to any of these meetings, So those are the bits that then you put the human in the loop, and there are controls that are put in place to secure and safeguard not just your IT environment, but also the entire processes. So I've touched on a couple of things. I'm just going to see if there are any other notes that I've taken. Yes, adoption. And that is true.
So we will be, if you can just hold on to that thought, we will come back to it because we're going into the question and answers. We're going to give the participants an opportunity to ask the questions. And if we are not getting the questions, then we'll just go into the second round of the conversation, Jania. Thank you so much. There are many things that you have shared with us today. I'm walking away with two words, transparency and explainability. And those are my two words for the day. It's got to be fair, impartial. And you've talked about the importance of data. You've also talked about, we've got to show the source of the data. So even as we're using it, we need to make sure that we are transparent about the source of the data. So we have a question which I'm going to give to Esohe. So Esohe, mitigating the risk is really worth considering, looking at a time when issues like data privacy and other key issues in HR is rising. A news trend recently was in the air about a CEO sacking its HR team as he applied anonymously to a role, and despite his qualification, could not sail through due to the wrong algorithm set by the HR department, as candidates could not pass the ATS metrics set by the team. So let's have your thoughts on that. And Kumbi, and Steve, you can, chime in at any time, and then we'll talk to Jania about adoption.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've talked extensively on the potential risk, right? So the use of AI, is just a tool, really. But then again, there are risks involved. So you've just given an example of a candidate who could not, pass the bars and all of those. So listening to Jenia earlier, there are a lot of things that we could build, right, into the, how would I put it, the back end. Kumbi earlier talked about a bias, for example, right? That use of generative AI can bring when you're going through a recruitment process. So if from, and Jenia expanded on that, so I'm just thinking, if from get-go, you build in those considerations into the whole architectural framework, the algorithm at the back, right? It would help you to reduce that risk, right? It would help you to a large extent, bring down the risk that you're looking at. So for example, if I say I want 20 engineers, fresh grad from school, right? And I don't put things around demographics, where they may want come from and all of that. Before you know it, I may have the challenge that Jenna talked about earlier, where everybody that was there was no female, right? And again, recently we talked about accessibility in the workplace and how you kind of look out for building up your D&I quota, and you're looking out for people who are differently abled, right? I doubt that if you don't put that into the whole back end architecture of your selection process, right, that becomes a risk where at the end of the day, you do an assessment, you record people, and then you find out that, oh, I haven't met a disability quota, for example, because I then have to go back to the drawing board again, and that's increasing cost of recruitment. So I would say the first principle really is to look at the framework of that which you want to do, and then make sure that the algorithm and the data you're using for everything you're doing is one that actually enables you as against one that disables, right? So at the end of the day, your pipeline is much stronger with the kind of results that you want to see, and you don't have to go back and redo any work.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Esohe. My question to Kumbi would be, how can an organization find that before other people find it? So if this algorithm is, if the data set that they use for training the AI is faulty, how will the organization, what are the things that you need to put in place to make sure that you are finding these things before other people find it for you?
Thank you. And I must say that I presume this is what has happened in the question that this guy raised. The CEO was just testing off and found out that the thing didn't do the right thing. I think Jania actually helped us with this particular question when she was talking. She had said that the first thing to do is to look at the demographics of you have, where you are getting the data sets from before creating the algorithm. Where is the source data coming from? And is this demographic, does it fit into where you are going and what you require and what should be the intended outcome? The intended outcome must be clear first, because the objective must be clear before we start to get into, okay, so how, if this is supposed to be the outcome, how then do we set the basics for this? And that will go into one, the pool of data itself. Second will be the quality of the data itself. Third will be the testing, or what you would call the piloting phase. How was that piloting phase done to ensure that it is all encompassing? When I was giving the example of recruitment, I said most organizations have competency framework. So in this instance, it could be that, look, the CEO is even overqualified, and the way the algorithm has been set, it throws out the CEOs by the time it starts to see certain data that is not part of the algorithm that has been set. So that then takes us to another dimension of there's change management embedded in all of this, because this is a transformational process. So to what extent have we started to educate people and what should they expect? And there must be that 1 degree risk, which we have all been talking about. And the CEO could have also been that exception, which we have also seen in this case. So I think the process of understanding the data set, the quality of the data set, the assessment, and then the testing, the phases across even the different parts of the organization, because in such cases, you really need to have different focus groups so that you can test the outcomes before you then go live and say, this is qualitative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kumbi. It's about testing, 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 and keep testing. Just the same way that you have ethical hackers who are constantly trying to hack your systems, for you to find the vulnerabilities, that you've got to constantly test the vulnerability of your AI. That's what we hear from you. Steve, there is somebody here who's asking, I work, she says she's Sarah Obi. She works as a HR project manager for a talent acquisition company. At the moment, she's working in training and development programs, employee retention and experience bonding and team building. What would you suggest or recommend they work remotely? I'm hoping that means, what kinds of ways can they use AI in the work that they do?
Okay, so again, so if I get right, so she's saying her current job is in talent retention, right? And recruitment.
She's all over the place. It's a talent acquisition company, but you know the way it is. We do training, we do employee retention, we do everything. So how can AI help them in the global share work that they are doing?
All right. So actually, what is, I mean, in general sense, IT is the greatest enabler for remote work. So the reason why a number of us are able to do remote work is we can work from home because we have IT systems. You can carry out recruitment processes because you have IT infrastructure to support that. So without that enabling IT infrastructure, you will not be able to support taking work home or making work home and making home work, as it were. So again, it comes back to the questions that I think Kumbi Sohe also responded to, which is around the specific example that was given. So if I respond to that as well, I use that to build up to further guidance to the person that raised the question. If you are to flip it as well, so because this CEO caught people because he said, hey, I used this to test the system and it didn't work. So therefore, you guys are crap. So you are fired, HR department fired. We tested what could have happened as well without the IT support. Yeah. If you had to do it manually, there would be a lot more errors. So I've seen situations, and it comes again to testing, where before we went public in using IT, for example, to do even including an ongoing recruitment process, we had tested it over and over and over with our internal resourcing processes. We've tested it to just make sure that this is working. We're playing with the data, and until we're sure that it will work, we're not comfortable going outside with it. So again, to this, my colleague, is to say, whatever you are doing, whether you are doing it at home, whether you are doing it in the office, how much have you tested the workability to be able to demonstrate it to your organization that this works? I mean, in our industry, you cannot be turning the valve at home. So this is really engineering work. You cannot do that, even though we're having all sorts of technical side to be able to support remote application of the systems, but it's not the same as when you are having this type of work example that has been cited. So it's to be able to just seek to understand the service you're offering, what needs to be done, and where does it need to be done. If the IT system or AI is supporting you, I'm not sure there is, so long as you have the right infrastructure to support you wherever you are working. So I'm not sure there is a question as to who is doing it. So if you are really IT enabled or AI enabled, there is not so much in terms of where you are doing it from. It's about how the work needs to be done. And if you are using IT as an enabler, is to just demonstrate to your organization that you have the infrastructure to support you to do that. And just like we were saying that this is everything is show me and evidence based, is for you to just demonstrate that whatever you do, the risks have been mitigated. And as you work from home as well, think about the other ethical things, the data privacy things, that I've been talking about. What mitigations have you put in place to be able to work elsewhere other than the infrastructure that have been given to you, from by your organization? My son, for example, works. He says he works because it's where they work. He's 100% at home. So when I say how was work, he will say, I'm not sure you are working because you've been at home. And I wanted him to come to Nigeria to do something. And he said the VPN of his organization will not allow him to work from Nigeria.
Yes.
For example, that is a safeguard in a positive way. So for data privacy, for organizational privacy, for all sorts of reasons, they have limited his ability to work from somewhere else. So what are the infrastructure support systems in place for your organization? And how are you demonstrating it to your leadership that this provides the best of option for you and your organization? And as you think about solution, whether you are working from home or working from the office, the question is not always about you. There has to be about the business. And what offers you the best chance to provide the best service to your organization should be the attention rather than what benefits you as an employee. But at the end of the day, in the fullness of time, it's still about hybrid and eternal vigilance to see that this is a new territory for all of us. We are learning as we fly along, and you need to always constantly test it, mitigate risk, because the risk of not mitigating those risks can actually suddenly erode your organization, and the consequences of which is actually more there if you don't watch it. Back to you, Chizo.
Thank you so much. Kumbi, what we're hearing and the kind of conversations that's going on is a typical Nigerian one. My boss wants to see me sweating and then looking at the dictionary to type memos and to type letters. How can I manage a boss who doesn't see using AI as smart working? Rather, they think you're working when you are doing everything manually. He enjoys employees sweating while sending mails, sitting in front of a laptop, equally hardworking for him, not minding the outcome of all the results. So, Esoya and Kumbi, how are we going to manage this thing about the Gen Zs are very lazy. All they are just doing is copying and pasting. You give them something. The next thing, they just throw something at you from AI. They are not working. How can we get people to understand that work does not need to be physical? The people can work smarter, and that's what AI is there for us. So please, over to you, Kumbi, and then I saw you weigh on how we can beat the bosses.
Thank you. Please permit me also to just add one word to what Steve said, especially for the person who asked the question. So for the person who asked the question, we all typically use Microsoft Teams in our organizations today. And honestly, if you follow the statistics, and since you're working remotely, work with your IT team, parameters can be set. And you would see what AI will give you, the number of meetings, the number of useful hours, it's mind-blowing, the kind of data that comes out of it. And you would then be able to use that statistically and see what you can refine, and with whatever other tools that the organization may have. But please take cognizance of everything that Steve had said, because all of these are equally very vital. That is just an example. Now,
and if I can chime in,
sure.
Sorry that I'm interrupting you. Remember with the conversation we had yesterday, when people came into the session yesterday, they came with their AI assistant to be able to probably take notes of the key issues that were raised. So, these are also use cases of the AI in remote work. So over to you on the question of beating our leaders.
Okay, so, organizational leaders are at different levels, spectrum of learning, especially for the older generation who really are struggling with technology. One of the things that I have found useful, if you don't have a vibrant leader who wants to be ahead of the pack, because this thing starts with the mindset, it starts with the hunger and a desire to be ahead and understand the dynamics of the world that is changing. If it's not there, it's not there. So the thing is this, you have to switch mode and understand that you have to become like a salesperson in your organization. That's the truth. And how does a salesperson work? A salesperson looks for your need, not a want. Understands your needs. So it would start from you deliberately building a relationship with this leader and positioning as I am there to enable you become this. And you only find out if you have built a relationship and you understand the vision of where the person is going. And that may entail not just conversational, wherever that opportunity occurs, where you have to sit, and really get down to the basics. All the ships off your shoulder has to just drop off because you're not there to shine and show off, which is usually the case. We always want to come abreast and say, hey, I can do this, I can do that. No, it starts from understanding the relationship, starts from thinking of enabling the person and, look at the pattern. What are the pattern of the problems that are shown off in the workplace? And how do you position, especially with the person, to say, Oga, we can do this with you. And we can quickly deliver to this customer so that the revenue can come in. The conversation has shifted away from you. It has shifted to value-driven, which most people don't understand that perspective. We can now give better value, better revenue if we go this way. Nobody ever resists a faster way that gives increased value, better positioning for the organization. These three factors, we must understand it. And so the question is, how are you selling it? Are you selling it about you? Or you're selling it about these three factors? Once the minute you shift that position, be intentional about the relationship, guess what? And we've been talking about it. We're now not seeing mentorship being just peer-to-peer. We're seeing it this way, and we're seeing it the other way too. So, and that begins to happen within the organization where we can cross-pollinate knowledge and we can become a better version of ourselves. So that would be my advice for you. Relook the positioning, look at how you want to enable, look at the problems you're solving, how you're building the relationships, and most importantly, enabling everybody to see the value that you bring on board with it.
Okay. So just very quickly, because we've just got 5 minutes and we still need to get Jania to talk about adoption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chizoba. In fact, you took the word out of my mouth. And thanks, Scooby has laid a great foundation. I thought adoption and onboarding for that leader. Two words just kept ringing in my head: adoption and onboarding. At the recent CIPM conference, most of us were there, I would say, and this whole thing about the different generations came up, and just it wasn't like we were calling the Gen Zs or the Gen Alpha lazy. It was just their different way of seeing things. And I think for this person who asked this question, it's around adoption and onboarding of that your leader. And like Kumbi said, let him see the value. So show him the value of that you're bringing to the table by using AI to do a number of the things that you're doing. And I must say that if you use AI in the right manner or generative AI in the right manner, it's in itself work. It's not for lazy people, because you actually would need to analyze that thing that you have gotten, make it fit for purpose, because there are times where it just gives you, you have to now tweak it to be bespoke, and suit what you want, and then be able to use it. So that comes with some level of intelligence, right? And I think that in showing your value, they will see that. The other thing is that it frees you up to be able to do more strategic things. And when that leader sees that that value is there, you're not just giving him and without even you yourself going through the rigor of maybe comparing this and comparing that and the various, that's the different options that you have to then come up with a final, that's when they think you're lazy. But if they see the amount of rigor and the work you put in, and the fact that it frees you up to be able to do other things that are also value adding, right? I think you will get the support that you require. The team where I work, most of my colleagues or my peers are all very senior people, right? And they are across the globe. To onboard ourselves and to make ourselves adopt, when we go into our leaders meeting every week, we first of all say, which part of AI are you bringing today? Or what have you done? Because we are all learning managers for different countries across the company. And we say, okay, what have you used AI to do this week? And from the basic thing, so we're seeing how even as leaders, we are actually adopting and using. And I will confess actually that in thinking about today, haven't put my head in the space and gone through my own search on my hard books and the rest, I went to AI. And it was interesting to see the correlation, that I could bring and, and the linkages of, okay, yeah, this is being said here. So that has been proven and all of that. And I could then easily then on my own know that, okay, yeah, I'm on the right path to doing things. So there is a lot of adoption you need to do as a young person for those that are your leaders and helping them see the value you bring to the table and how it frees you up to do more and take on more tasks. I think your leader will support you. Thank you.
Yes. And just before Jania comes on, thank you very much for that. The way I use, I have a young colleague who supports me in, doing the research. He doesn't have as much experience as you and I, would have within the space. And so he will prompt, he's very good at prompting AI. And just before we came on, we're talking about questions. The quality of questions that we ask AI is the quality of answers that we can get out of AI. And when he initially started, the answers were all over the place and just didn't make any sense, But as he's working with me and we're having conversations, he's thinking like me and he's prompting a bit like what I will do, and we're getting much better answers. So for young people who are working with old fuddy-duddies like us, that's one way of helping us, and say, here is research for you to use. And then, and we all forget Google was the first AI. Even though we had to go read the materials ourselves, now it's now being summarized for us. Jania, we're going to end with you, and we're ending, like I told you, we have a hard stop at 10:55. So the question is adoption of AI in human resources. That's what everybody is saying in the chat room. What's your advice to us?
Excellent. Again, the really interesting conversation and insightful. We cannot expect today's generation to be working the way we did. And it's apparent, I'm looking at my kids. When my older son was 2, he would go to Alexa and say, Alexa, play Baby Shark. How do you expect him to now go and look for CDs from some cupboard, like wardrobe somewhere, come and put it in a record player? It's not going to happen. Or my 5-year-old did a presentation in his class and used an image that was generated by AI. PowerPoint didn't exist until I was 20. So really, the world is changing, right? And it's all about work smarter, not harder. But so I think we've all established that when it comes to the workforce, they are ready to utilize AI. So how do you now then do, increase adoption? The way you increase adoption is by setting the tone at the top. It is to create awareness in leadership, in the C-suite, on the benefits of AI, and also demystify AI, because there's always that uncertainty of if you don't know what it is, you're not comfortable using it, which is why we spend a lot of the time. So myself, Joseph, and our colleagues, we spend a lot of the time speaking to boards, executives, and doing executive AI training to help them understand what AI is, traditional AI versus generative AI. I mean, what is this new kid on the block? And not just also talking about the art of the possible, what it can do, but creating practical use cases on how it's impacting the specific business they're in and how it's impacting the role they're in. We go as far as talking about different personas and practical uses of AI in each of the personas. And we get a lot of great feedback. And once they walk out of that session, and not just that, we also talk about the role of the board in adoption, the investments that they need to make in talent and enabling talent and empowering talent. So by creating that awareness in the top layer, then when the functional heads or the staff are coming to them with AI propositions or the way they can change or do their work differently, then the leadership is already ready and the mind is set to adopt that. So I think that's where you bridge the gap. And I think I'm just going to stop that because it's 55 past. So it's creating that awareness. And if there's anything we can support you, so this is to our audience. If you want us to come and talk to your C-suite, to the board, we are ready, because that is the way to go. And that's the way you bridge the gap between the generational differences as well as the different roles in an organization. Thank you, Chizoba.
Thank you very much. It's been an amazing time talking to all of you, coming from different angles on these AI conversation, and then wrapping it up with our AI experts, Jania. We've learned quite a lot. Steve, thank you for sharing, about the chatbot. And I'm sure that people now realize that, they can train the AI to be able to support the employees, even in simple things like understanding their policy. Thank you, Esohe, for the conversation around ATS and AI interviews and the risk, as well as the efficiency, that we can get out of it. Thank you, Kumbi, for dimensioning the issues around the risk and the advantages. You can see from the feedback from everyone, this has been a useful conversation. Please look at our hashtags and let's continue the conversations on LinkedIn, as well as for 15 minutes after this, so I know some people have asked their questions that came in rather late. We will be able to take on some of those questions. We'll be able to take on some of those questions in the party after party. So I'm going to hand over to Joseph, who's our host. Joseph is going to make his closing remarks. We'll do the hard stop, and then we now transition into the questions. Elias, please can you put up the hashtag so that we can people can pick up the hashtag for the conversations on LinkedIn. Thank you very much. Over to you, to Joseph.
All right. Thank you very much, Chizoba. I'm sure I can't thank enough erudite panelists, right? So I would thank Jen as part of us. So from Kumbi to Esohe to Dr. Steve, and Dr. Steve, be rest assured that when next year we're having this, we'll have more men in the room. So thank you very much for your time. I mean, this has been very helpful, it's been very useful, and it's been very insightful. And just like Chizoba said, I mean, the conversation continues. But just, as part of the, my closing remarks, I think there are a couple of, just to summarize what our panelists have, what they've done, the things they've said today. But let's just look at just a couple of slides, just in 2 minutes or thereabout. I think Jana did justice to the fact of, in terms of how do we start this journey. So it is a journey, clearly, that we're trying to embark on. And, I think she spent a lot of time talking about even at Kumbi as well. So what I'm saying is that as we go, out of this particular webinar, it's important to just take some of these lessons. So it's important to start with that education. I think that we've spoken about that. I will need to, of course, begin to ask ourselves, what can we explore? And I think it was Kumbi or Janet that talk about the vision. What can we ideate? We don't want to boil the ocean. They of course move to experiment, we launch, and of course we continue to iterate. Right. Now, but one thing that is also quite critical as we go through this journey, and that's one thing that for me it's important, that resonates with me a lot, is how do we, right, continue to recognize the fact that this whole AI, it's just basically an advancement of what we'll be talking about in terms of the future of work. So in terms of how we look at work, how we look at the workplace, and how we look at the workforce. So what our advice basically is that the first thing to think about is, next slide, is we need to think about how we design work. That is the first thing, really. And I think our panelists have spoken a lot about this. We need to understand what to be done. We need to understand what is being done now and how do we need to, how can we redesign work? Now, the next thing, of course, is then develop what we call our workforce strategy and, of course, reimagine workforce. But clearly, all this, it will be based on the fact that we have a clearly defined vision of where we're headed. If that is not done, right, it will be tough for us to be able to do this. And that's why that issue around education, awareness, getting that, buy-in is so critical. Now, in talking about redesigning work, and because I think a couple of you have asked that question in the past, I'm going to just share with you just one slide and we'll wrap up. When you talk about next slide, when you talk about redesigning work, it's important to understand the fact that, from an AI perspective, AI, we can look at the journey, again, like I said, the continuum, go from whether I needed the AI from, and because you need to understand the task first. And, the last slide, of course, will guide us that, we're not going to talk about it, but, it will be a takeaway. We need to understand that the bit, of a process that we need to automate. So the question is, first is, think of that automation assistant. Okay? Now, what are those, processes that we can simplify and that we can need to automate, right? To perhaps complete the process. Then, of course, the next thing is, think of that cognitive assistant. Okay? So again, what are those, rules that you can train the AI on that can help us, that are rule-based, and it's very easy for us to help us into what we do. Then, of course, we go to the point around, having what we call the AI advisor, okay? Where, of course, can help us to actually solve some, complex, human-like, issues that we can deal with. And, of course, like Jenna did say, how do we ensure that humans, of course, can work side by side, of course, with AI? It's not about loss of job, but it's more around augmentation. So the next slide just summarizes this for us, and I think it will be a fantastic way for us to end this. So we can take this home, we can look at this, and this helps in terms of, if I want to start this journey, and I want to talk about how to look at, to kind of decompose work, right, to segment work. This helps you in a great deal. What then to compress, what can I optimize, and what can I enhance? So on that note, once again, I'll say thank you to everyone, to all our participants for being part of this session today. And like Chizoba did say, this conversation continues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for thanking us. And thank you to all the 300 people who have remained on the platform as we go into the conversations. Can somebody mute Jumoke so that we can continue the conversation? Thank you very much. We've seen all your comments. Joseph, I think this last slide is very critical. And if you can just share a bit more on that periodic table, because I like the fact that, you talked about the assistants, you talked about the, I didn't quite look in details at it, but that looks like the continuum.
Cognitive advisor, yeah.
Cognitive advisor, that looks like the continuum of what we could have. And do I get it that the slides will be available to people?
Apparently.
Is there anywhere we can get some of the information? Is this something that we can share? If it's not something that we can share, then that's so we just let people know. But
we'll share the slides.
We can share the slides. Thank you very much. And so that we can continue the conversations, because I think that will be important for people. So we still have some questions here that says that how can organizations ensure, I think we've answered it more or less, but Jania, you can weigh in on that. AI-driven decisions in HR are transparent, ethical, and unbiased. Are there established frameworks to mitigate the risk of algorithmic bias in talent decisions?
Hi there, Chizoba. I think I touched up on that,
Yes.
on the various frameworks that you can actually do. There
Okay.
are algorithms. So there's this concept of AI risk monitoring that are put in place in organizations where you actually have a platform or a set of processes that actually go and monitor the risks of the current live AI solutions. And then they test for transparency, they test for fit for purpose, because, for example, if something that was built today with the data from the last year, it's fit for purpose today, but it doesn't mean a year from now it's still good. It might need to be retrained. So there is the entire risk taxonomy that you go through in terms of what's already in production, the levels of risk. Is it client facing? Is it internal? Is it, making key decisions? And, you start to monitor, and then you can literally have a dashboard of green, amber, red, and what are some of the action points that need to happen. So in addition to the trustworthy AI framework that I mentioned, there are actually practical controls that one puts in place, like this one, that are able to help mitigate some of the risks.
Thank you very much. Somebody's saying, for me, when I use an AI tool in writing, I first of all make an edit my draft before I place it on an AI tool to make it better. After which very exhausted, which I edit it again to suit me. Do I still need to reference AI in my writing? Who's gonna pick that one up? Okay. So it looks like Jania has a meeting. She's dropping off. Jania, thank you so much for enriching the conversations. We do appreciate you. And if you liked Jania and the insight she brought into this, please do write it there. Thank you, Jania. Put it in the chat.
Thank you very much, Chizoba. Thanks, Joseph. And thank you, panelists. I really enjoyed our conversation. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Jania. So, do we have to reference AI in the writing when we've edited and unedited and re-edited?
All right. So, Kobe, do you want to go or you want to just jump in? So if I understand you, Chizoba, clearly, the participant is asking, first is who's the author, right? Mm-hmm. From my understanding of what he said, he is the author, right? Even if except in the course of that editing, there are other references from ChatGPT itself or from AI, then of course you need to do that. But if you are the auditor, right? And then, like you said, you prepared it originally, you put it in there, whatever AI tool you are using, it's done the editing, it's back to you, re-edit again and send back at the end of the day. The reality is that you still remain the initial author of that entire work. So I don't think there's anything that, stops you from, or that actually compels you rather from referencing, the AI tool that you use. But if in the course of that process, right? Because to be honest today, people even use AI for their thesis. And I've seen that happening, people use it for their own projects. So if there are other reference materials in the course of that, right, from AI, it's important that you actually reference it. You reference those materials.
Okay. So
Joseph is a professor.
You
I think he's talking. I think that is at higher levels. I think this person is just basic writing.
Okay.
From what I read, I could be wrong, but it says, in writing, I first make a draft, and I think it's basic writing. But for all you care, it could also be up to the level of a thesis as well.
No, but even in basic writing, it could be. Think about it. You've written something, and there are quotes from it.
Oh, so, sure. Yeah. I think the fundamental thing is to remember that what is your own objective of the writing. And like Joseph said, if you are the author, what exactly are you seeking to achieve? So if even with all your amendments, if you think it's still not giving you, nothing stops you from putting everything again back into AI and then using a different prompt or questioning line to say, refine this to indicate, refine this to show, the kind of prompts like we have all earlier alluded to is what it gives you. So, nothing stops you. And if you think your objective has been achieved, why not, if you are the author?
Okay. So my thoughts on that would be it's just like you do your initial draft. So ChatGPT or AI has done your initial draft for you. You've modified it. You've looked at it. You've added your own bits to it. You own it, because remember, even the prompts which you gave ChatGPT were your own prompts. It didn't generate the prompts for you to be able to prompt it. So you've prompted it. It's giving you the response. You've modified it. As long as there is no proprietary material or there are no copyright or trademark issues around what you have done, these are your own thoughts. After all, we go to Google and then we read something and then we come back and we write it, and turn it into something that, makes sense. So if you are referencing somebody's material, then you will, the author of that material is the person that you reference. Now, if you want, to the point of being naked and not just transparent, you could say that this was AI generated, if it will make you feel better about, your conscience. Okay. Let's look at the next question. It talks about, unfortunately, Esohe couldn't say goodbye to us. And so I would also like you to just please say thank you to Esohe for the insight that she brought in. So you can just, put in comments there and I'll let her know how many of you really enjoyed the time that she spent with us here. So we have a question on how does AI help in policy changing employee engagement and determining the compensation and benefit for staff? I understand that this is based on previous data provided. However, you might be thinking of changing current policies in a company completely, and AI might not drift entirely from what has been provided. Joseph?
Sorry.
So I think the person is talking about, they want to policy changing employee engagement and determining the compensation and benefit for staff. I understand that this is based on previous data that may have been provided. However, you might be thinking of changing the current policies in a company completely, and AI might not drift entirely from what has been provided.
Okay, so when you say, okay, so let me, if you understand the question quite well, I think we're back to what we said earlier. So where we started this whole thing, I think, I don't know whether it was Kumbi that spoke to that extensively in terms of what exactly are you trying to achieve, right? So if you're talking about generating certain insights, okay, the question is from which data or from what set of data? Okay, if you're, and I think Jenny also alluded to that. So if you are trying to generate information or insights from data of 2023 or 2022 and 2024, what you will get exactly, and I think I did mention that earlier, is garbage in, garbage out. It will give you information on that 2022. However, the question is, and it just takes me back to the fact that you need to then go back and say, what is the source of data? Do I need to update that source of data before I can generate those insights? Because if I do not, I will only get what exactly I've requested for based on data that's available. Right.
Okay.
I think.
Go ahead.
Except I missed out on that question, but
no, you're not wrong. There's just many approaches, my thought. And the first thing I would want to know is this person, have you been conducting employee engagement surveys before in your organization?
So,
if you have been, then that means you have historical data. In that historical data, most organizations that do this, they are external to your organization, except you are doing it internally. Anyway, so let's assume you do it internally or externally, whichever way it is, you are doing something. It means you are sitting on some form of data. And if it is historical data, if you've done it in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, that's almost giving you 4 years span of data. The interesting thing is there will be the demographics of it, because the surveys typically allow you to also check the demographics of the people who are filling in the data. You may then have to use a predictive analysis tool to then say what has been the changing pattern, the specifics with these generations, and look at the current generations that you have, look at the generational responses, the current policies you have, what has not been addressed over the years, and what is the predictive analytics saying to you that you should be looking at how to then position the organization. You may then use the collective information to redesign the policy. Same thing will go for your compensation and benefits.
And then when you've done that, you train your AI on the new policy.
On the new policy.
So it's not going to drift. So everybody, we all need to understand that AI is what you give it that it brings up for you. And all it just does is, based on the questions that you've asked, to answer that question, still using the data that you have provided for it. So it's not going to go and collect data from another place or keep referring to the old data. If you train it on the new data and say that this is new policy, it will give you what the new policy says. If you ask it about the old policy, it will tell you what the old policy says and can tell you the changes that have been made between the old policy and new policy. So just think of it as just an extra brain that you're tapping. You know, one is old, the other one is new, and the two of them are jamming into one to give you the information that you require. How can AI improve employee performance management? There is a performance management system in place already. Examples of tools that I don't know if we can answer those tools, but this is entirely the purview of Deloitte, and I would encourage you to have a conversation with Deloitte about performance management. They've got great, I'm telling you, because I've been with them on series of engagement, and I've been with them on client engagement, and they have amazing tools that can help you in any area. Deloitte is far ahead in the future of work, and if you do want to talk about future of performance management, future of recruitment, future of compensation, future of any aspect of human resources, talk to Deloitte. And so can somebody, Esther, if we can pick up Abimbola Onifade's details, and then we can chat with her about the kinds of tools that she can use in performance management.
Yeah, thanks, okay. More than happy to actually share. Yeah, there are tons and tons of tools out there, rather, but again, it's going to be a function of what's your appetite to do that. And I think just to keep this conversation simple, the whole idea about, performance management is, again, what are you trying to measure? Are you looking at outcomes or outputs, right? I mean, our advice should look at outcome, okay? And the beauty of AI, you can use AI to actually collect data at different times, okay? You can use AI to analyze, the outcome of that data, and you can create trend analysis in the back of that. And just like Kubi said earlier, you can actually, figure out what the future will look like, so from a predictive point of view. And it then helps to know which area do you need to focus on. I mean, today I will talk about agile way of measuring performance. AI is very handy in trying to help you in driving that kind of, discussion as well. So, like Chizoba said, we're more than happy to share, some nuggets with you on the back of this.
Thank you so much. AI data privacy issues. What sayeth we on AI data privacy issues? What are your thoughts?
I think that Jenny already mentioned this as well. One, your chief compliance officer must work with the CTO very clearly, and the boundaries for the organization on what data we want to put out there and what data can we not put out there. We must also adhere by the data privacy guidelines, both whatever you have in whichever country that you have, and then looking at a global ethics code. What are the limits? What are the things we can do and what can we not do? So the business itself must make the boundary lines very clear, and this will be championed by the chief compliance officer. If you have a chief ethical officer as well, by all means, the conversation will be, it's a stakeholder conversation from the business side. and then to the front facing, to the technology that enables the organization. And then the boundary lines are fixed before anything is adopted at all.
Okay. Thank you very much. My way in on it is, remember the conversation we had yesterday about transparency. And the fact that we need to start talking to people, employees, we need to be open to employees about the data that we're collecting. So we do all this sentiment analysis. We have AI that analyzes emails, analyzes conversations, and stuff, and then is able to pick up, engagement trends and engagement issues, from some of those conversations. So we also go into meetings, we talked about it, we go into meetings with AI assistant, and our meetings are never straightforward. We are never talking only purely about business issues. There are some family things or some personal things that come into it. Where do we draw the line in terms of the data that the AI is trained on, or the data that the AI utilizes in generating the content that we require? So these are some of the things that we need to have at the back of our mind, and to make sure that people are aware of what we're going to, that we're collecting the data, and what we're going to do with the data. And like he says, provide opt-out for individuals, so that, they can opt out of that data being collected, about them. So I think transparency is very critical. And then we've also just got to be careful, about how that data is shared and where that data is shared. Joseph, anything from you?
No, I think you said it all, just in addition to what could be said. So I'm pretty fine with that.
Okay. And then there are strategy concerns. I think we've answered the intellectual property. Okay, so the intellectual property and corporate, I think we've answered that in terms of we've got to be clear in terms of what we are going to put out there, what strategy that we're going to adopt in that. Somebody is asking if you can mix AI and HR software together at the same time, or can AI perform the role of HR software? Joseph, over to you.
All right. So I think, again, it all depends on what exactly we're trying to achieve. What's part of the HR function you're trying to work on. And I don't want to use the word automate, because I know it's not about automation now, right? They're trying to work on. So the reality is that if you and I can take your simple, tools that you use, your seamless HR, for instance. I mean, where maybe it's not the best, but we'll just mention a few. Maybe it's SAP and things like that. So now, one of the things you found out today is the fact that you see a lot of these vendors now begin to talk about that the solution, it has incorporated AI, right? And what that simply means is that it is still the same HR solution, right, that you use, but now they kind of incorporated AI, because at the end of the day, don't forget that what we've been saying all along, right, is the fact that, AI is all about learning from patterns, right? And then, of course, making, those, creating those insights, creating those, insight for you, right, at the end of the day. But the reality is that, so you can imagine taking your SAP tool, right? Or Kumbi earlier talked about employee engagement, for instance. You've done all manner of engagement using some internal tools for engagement. AI can sit on it and do all the analysis for you. It is actually going to take the beauty of how AI actually is, like what some of your tools will do, is that because AI is going to learn on the patterns that's available and can create new things for you. You can ask and say, I want this, and it can generate it for you. Now, in some of those tools, you may have to go back and say, or do software, can you create this for me? Can you do this for me? So, but the beauty of AI is that as long as you have that data, that source, you can, and then you can ask the right questions, it will give you those answers. So to your point, yes, they will work together.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So you can our tool can provide the data sets that the artificial intelligence can help us with. I know when we think of AI, I think our problem, or a lot of us are hemmed in by ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, Bard, whatever it is. But there's just a whole lot. There's the one that generates videos. There's the one that generates audio. All sorts of
text to
so,
image.
Yes, there's the one that does the calculation. There's just so much that is out there, and we'll just encourage people, please explore. The bandwidth of our imagination should be stretched to the point that we should know, and I'm putting this challenge to you. You should know at least 50 AIs between now and December. Just go find them, what they can do. So Kumbi is dropping off now, and we will be probably just winding down the conversation. But this is to say thank you so much to Kumbi. Kumbi brings a lot of passion. She brings a lot of knowledge and experience into conversations that she's involved in. And we just want to say thank you so much, Kumbi, for expanding our knowledge today, and then bringing your own insights to it. So please put it in the chat room. Kumbi, thank you very much for your insight. So insightful Kumbi, just put it down there for me. Insightful Kumbi, and the full is FULL. Insightful Kumbi. Thank you so much, Kumbi.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you, sis. Thank you so much. Thank you. And so I don't know if anybody, if Joseph, you have you've already said your last words. Esther, if you have anything to add, but this is to say thank you to everyone for being great audience. We still have 267 people still on and listening to us. All we can say again, please put it down there. If you think that Deloitte has added value to you today, simply say Deloitte delivered value today. Again, Deloitte delivered value today. Again, Deloitte delivered value today. Again, Deloitte delivered value today. Again. And please remember, let's not stop the conversation here. Let's go to LinkedIn and continue the conversation. People need to understand, learn what we have all learned today, and continue the conversation there. It's been my pleasure hosting this again this year, and I'm looking forward to the next set of HC trends. Please make sure that you go and, do we still have the link for the HC trends, please? So we can put it up for people so that they can go and be part of the conversations that we're going to have next year. And we are looking forward to when the HC trends for 2025 come out, you will still be part of the conversation with us. Please, the link, if we can find it, just give us a moment. Don't go yet. Let us give you the souvenir, which is the link to the 2025 Deloitte HC trends. Please, thank you. Please, just who can help us with the link? I think it's normally Elijah that helps us. It's normally Elijah that helps us so that we can okay, maybe we'll just put it, just if you are connected to me, if you're connected to Kumbi, if you're connected to the panelists, we will send it to them and encourage them to please, there's a recap email. That's fine. I will try and see how we can, get it out to you. But if you see it, okay, Nkem has put that here. Please, Nkem has dropped it. Nkem has dropped it. And Ayowale, yes, DDVAT, yes, Deloitte delivered value again today. Thank you so much, and have an awesome day. God bless you. Thank you, Oga Joseph, and thank you, Esther.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Esther. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Deloitte team. Chike, Nkem, Elijah, Tommy. Where's everyone?
That'll be Mobolaji. Elijah.
That's a silent achiever.
Mobolaji.
Thanks, Toby. Thanks, Esther.
Our Jumoke.
Yes, Jumoke. And
Thanks a lot.
comfort as well. Thank you.
Yes, comfort. Our
Comfort, that's
keeper.
true.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you, comfort. Thank you. And thank you, audience. See you. We're doing a hard stop now. Thank you so much. Have an awesome day.
Thank you.